So some of you will remember that trend where women were asking their partners how often they thought about the Roman Empire, and the answers were shocking. In case you missed it, the answers were often multiple times a week. Well, it turns out the reason why might be that our guys out there are picking up on a vibe. We've all heard by now that the astrology of 2025 and 2026 is crazy. I also keep hearing that we've never seen astrology like this before. Well, it turns out that's not true. I found myself watching this episode of the Freedman podcast with historian Gregory Aldrete, who's an expert on the Roman Empire, and I couldn't help but wonder what the astrology was like at the different periods of time he was talking about. Lo and behold, right around the years most people recognize as the fall of Western Rome, we were in nearly identical astrology as to what we're about to experience through 2025 and 2026. Let's take a look. You'll notice on one half of the screen here, we have Pluto conjunct the South Node in Virgo. Pluto's at 0 degrees. We have Saturn and Neptune in a conjunction in Libra, about to transition into Scorpio together, in a sextile to Pluto. And then we've got Uranus in a trine to Pluto and a sextile to Saturn and Neptune at the critical degree of Sagittarius, about to enter Capricorn. This was the astrology on October 4th, the year 481. Now, if we look at the wheel on the other half of the screen, we've got Pluto at 1 degree Aquarius, Saturn and Neptune in a conjunction, about to leave Pisces for Aries, putting them in a sextile to Pluto. And we've got Uranus at the critical degree of Taurus, about to enter Gemini, putting Uranus in a trine to Pluto and a sextile to Neptune and Saturn. This wheel is the astrology for November 28th, 2025. So not only in 481, really from the span of 480 to 483, do we have Pluto in a trine to Uranus, the two of them changing signs. We also have Saturn and Neptune in a conjunction, about to change signs, and in a sextile to both Pluto and Uranus. We call this a mini grand trine in astrology. The exact configuration for all of the outer planets, Saturn through Pluto, in both periods of time. Notice we've got the nodes in the exact same position as well. The South Node in Virgo in both charts, and the North Node in Pisces in both charts. It gets even weirder, but let's pause here for a second. So like with any major transition in history, there's no exact hard date that the Roman Empire fell, but we do know in the year 476, after an 85-year span of there being two emperors of Rome, one in the east in Constantinople, one in the west, the child emperor who'd been attempting to hold down the west was pushed out somehow, some way. He was pushed out by a barbaric soldier who would then crown himself the very first king of Italy. Now, I'm not a historian, but from what I could find, it looks like things were just a little dicey for the next couple of years, but by 480, Emperor Zeno over in the east had decided to just give up on the idea of there being two emperors of Rome. This, of course, left a power vacuum in what we now know as Western Europe, and a rather tumultuous period of time ensued where barbaric soldiers would engage in battles, power struggles, overthrows, and inevitably name themselves king. Now, this is where things get really interesting and a little bit creepy. One such soldier, named King Clovis I, the leader of a Germanic tribe called the Franks, had this miraculous moment on the battlefield where he swore that he'd been spared and led to victory by God. Even though he hadn't himself yet converted to Christianity, he was still in the polytheistic school. This moment supposedly changed him, and he crowned himself king of the Franks, embattling himself and his men over territory that would later become France. He told his men that he'd been chosen by God. Sounds kind of familiar. Now, you probably clicked on this video because you saw this image. Our pal Clovis is the one in the middle. You all know President-elect Donald Trump. The gentleman on the other side was the one to start the trend. This is Emperor Constantine. His reign was in the 300s, a century before Clovis. And what you want to remember is that this is the early days of Christianity. Up until around that point, much of Rome had still been polytheistic. Everybody believed in multiple gods. Christianity and the idea that there's one sole god up there overseeing everything had really risen to popularity. Constantine brilliantly looked around and recognized this and said, well, there's one god and he chose me, so I must be the emperor. A pretty brilliant political move. Now back to the 480 to 483 window with our creepily similar astrology. Yale history professor Paul Freedman dubbed this period of time a time of thugs and miracles. partly because of the warlike climate, the barbarian soldiers making themselves kings, but the church also had a lot of power. Bishops, in fact, were believed to be able to cure blindness and disease, similar to the kings, because they'd been chosen by God to be able to do so. And so fast forward, here we are in modern day, under nearly the exact same astrology. And I don't know about you guys, but the whole idea of thugs and miracles, it doesn't not track, right? Who knows what kinds of crazy miracles, actual miracles, we're gonna see in the decades ahead with the advancement of AI, right? Mark Zuckerberg, of all people, working with his wife to cure cancer using AI. And there's actually huge potential that it could happen. But speaking of Mark Zuckerberg, if you looked around Trump's inauguration, it didn't not look like he had a gang around him. But the key thing to be aware of here, astrologically speaking, is in both periods of time, both instances, then and now, every planet in the sky changed signs in an incredibly short period of time. That is a ton of change. Saturn and Neptune in conjunction often represents the working people, the lower classes. Pluto has a lot to do with power, often sources of power we can't see, like our subconscious having power over us. Or, like a bunch of tech bros who've made God only knows what kind of deals with the devil, not calling our current president a devil, just using a euphemism here, or vice versa, right? Deals tend to go both ways. Deals or thuggish alliances. Not only is it going to be pretty interesting to watch their relationships with one another change over the years ahead, our relationship with the government and larger power structures is likely to go through a lot of changes as well. And what we definitely want to take note of is what a point of no return it was back then. For centuries, all people had known was the Roman Empire. This period of time was a clear line in the sand of no turning back, and thus, we are likely to see in the years ahead such a change. I'm not here to tell you what on earth that's going to look like, and the fall of the Roman Empire sounds pretty dramatic, right? But I encourage people to check out the podcast episode on Lex Freedman. I was sitting there listening and thinking, oh my God, this guy sounds like he's talking about the disconnect between the people and those in power today. Now, I told you there were some more weird synchronicities between the astrology back then and the astrology of now. If you really want to nerd out, you should check out the article I wrote on Substack on this topic. It'll be linked down below. I get really, really granular. This is some pretty complex geometry, and we want to not only consider where we are now in that geometry, but we want to go back to where these cycles started. What was the seeding point, the moment of initiation, and how can we trace that to where we are now? It's pretty complex, and we'd be here for hours. So head over to Substack, check out the article. What we should talk about here, though, is the good news. In 2026, there is this beautiful moment pointed out by legendary astrologer André Barbault, where Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus will all be in the configuration they are now, but exact. Trines and sextiles making up this mini grand trine are the two more harmonious beneficial aspects. So we're traveling in that with Saturn all throughout this time period as these planets all change signs. But then in 2026, there's this beautiful moment where Jupiter enters Leo and joins the party, opposing Pluto. Let's think about what Jupiter represents and what Pluto represents. Jupiter being that moral compass, that philosopher, who governs the self wisely for the sake of themselves, yes, but also everyone around them, because Jupiter has to then run into Saturn next. Just think about that section of the zodiac, right? It's a Jupiter-ruled sign, Sagittarius, then Saturn's two signs, and then Jupiter finishes the whole cycle off. Jupiter has to sandwich Saturn, essentially. And then if we think about Pluto, on a personal level, it's our shadow. On the generational level, it's the collective shadow. And it can also signify shadowy leadership or good leadership. Every planet, every sign, every aspect has a positive and a negative to it. This configuration looks a lot like leadership, Pluto being held accountable. The opposition's also taking place with Jupiter and Pluto in the same signs, only reversed. Back then, at the beginning of this crazy period of time, Jupiter in Aquarius opposed Pluto in Leo. Fast forward to the summer of 2026, pointed out by André Barbault, Jupiter will be in Leo, shining, and Pluto will be in Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is a Saturn-ruled sign. It has everything to do with our ideals for society, larger ecosystems. If Barbault's prediction is correct, it could really work to our benefit. This time with Jupiter in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, the power being with the people, our solar figures might just be forced to find their moral inner compasses. Remember, Aquarius is technology and innovation. The people have the power to see what they're up to and hold them accountable in ways we never have been able to before, thanks to modern technology. Barbault writes, "It is the most benefic configuration of the century, and its planetary partnership will work for the best in a splendid relaunch of civilization. It contains a harmonious relationship between primordial polar opposites, the coming together of the external and the internal, rational and spiritual, mind and soul. Human beings surpassing themselves while experiencing life on a higher level." Now, I would bet with the North Node in Pisces, Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, them essentially changing signs, right? They're going to have to cross over one another. Aries is a fire sign. Pisces is the wateriest of the water signs. While the North Node was in Aries, we saw a trend of dangerous wildfires. And with Neptune in Pisces, we've seen pretty dangerous hurricanes and other such climate change related events. I could be wrong. Maybe that stuff will all calm down. But either way, it looks like climate change is likely to have something to do with it being the inevitable changes to power and the way the people are governed in the years ahead. I know I'm talking a big game here, guys, but it does look like we're at this absolutely wild turning point in history. We can see it every time we look at the headlines. Change is here, and we as a species don't like change in general. But I'm going to link a big think video down below for anyone who needs it. Dr. Klaas is in this video talking about what he calls the myth of predictability, which is a brilliant observation about how much modern luxury and modern convenience have essentially mentally crippled us. I'm laughing with everybody, not at anybody. Think about the way we can order pretty much whatever food we want through Uber Eats and have it delivered to our doorstep. It's like some of us are living fantastically luxurious lives in comparison to what's going on in Africa and the Middle East. And lo and behold, it comes at a cost. Because so many of us are living such convenient, luxurious lives, our brains have been fooled, conditioned to think that the world around us is much more malleable, in our control, and predictable than it is in reality. And right? We turn on the news, we listen to our politicians who can't accept reality like climate change, and in the dance of denial that follows suit, the doing anything about it keeps getting delayed. So many of us have fallen into this trap. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but in recognizing it, it's like, okay. This might be a good time to reevaluate what really matters. You know, the silver linings to what just took place in LA and the recent hurricanes down south was that people had to start working together, having compassion for one another, helping one another. We have all this modern luxury and modern convenience, yet we're all lonelier than ever before, right? We've lost community. I do not think it's going to be an easy period of time, but there will definitely be silver linings that restore us a bit back to our true empathetic nature. Now, hilariously, at the same time, with AI becoming more and more a part of our daily lives, it might feel a little bit like the opposite. Like if you call customer service at Walmart, for example, and you can't get the person on the other line to help you beyond a normal script, you're not talking to a human being. But it's going to be hard to recognize, and it's likely to feel like a lack of empathy in the meantime. I suspect this is going to be a period of time where we focus on restoring ours, because it has historically been one of the keys to our survival. So I'm back in full force. For those of you who've missed me, who've been with me for a while, I took some time off to address some health issues, but I really actually made some progress, which is great. You'll see me every month with an overview of the lunar cycle ahead. I have completely revamped my website and my offerings. There's a dollar menu now. I'm also offering session packages now, so my usual 1-hour sessions at a discounted rate. These are awesome if you're new to astrology. They're also great if you're under a tricky longer term transit and you could just use an objective outside view to chat with about the real things going on in your life as you're navigating your way through. So be sure to check that out at my new website, astrologywithcolleen.com. I've got all kinds of goodies for you guys today linked down below. It is going to be a crazy period of time, but I think it will also be a pretty epic period of time, a lot of opportunity opening up on the horizon. And I am here for you guys through it all. Be sure to subscribe, hit me up for a reading, and I'll see you in the next one.